I first also wanted to begin to talk about the impact that this most recent election cycle has taken on my personal life. And yes, there's going to be this type of election every 4 years. This is not the first time that, the United States has been not so united and has been divided, especially on a political front, given that we live in a two-party system. But nonetheless, this election cycle has been very interesting for me, not necessarily because of the stance that I've taken, but watching my family members, such as my dad or my grandma, watching their, emotions be so evoked this election cycle was very hard. I mean, quite literally, I would see my dad shake with rage. I would see his face get red. I would also see my grandma, and I'm no doctor, but it was as though her blood pressure would rise whenever we spoke about politics. And it was very hard to watch my family members be so affected by talking about these things. And that's not at all to cast away the importance of politics and be like, oh, let's just be a hippie and love everybody and, get over it. These issues are important, and I'm not a political commentator, so I'm not necessarily here to talk about the issues, but what I am here to talk about is our mindfulness and our presence during these issues and how that can actually help us when we are trying to have dialogue in terms of this election. There are ways that we can access different parts of ourselves in a way that we can access our higher self. So when we are talking about politics or when we are talking about the election, our blood pressure doesn't have to raise and we don't have to begin to sweat. We don't have to go into overdrive and we don't have to inevitably end up saying something that we regret that could push away somebody that we truly love, because that is kind of what I wanted this mindfulness political video to be about, is how do we separate the very high stakes and the very emotional protective parts of ourselves, how do we separate that from the conversation of politics so that we can actually have thoughtful discussions as opposed to just hating on each other and getting highly emotional. Not saying that your emotions aren't valid, but just saying, how do we work with something that's so prominent? Especially given the culture war that's kind of going on right now between both men and women. We quite literally can see, based on polls and polling evidence, how women and men voted very differently this election cycle, and how that this can play a role into dating, because if you are a woman and you did vote for Kamala Harris because of the abortion issue, versus if you are a man and you voted for Trump because you take a pro-life stance, we can easily see how these very different viewpoints can begin to collide and begin to create a lot of chaos. Is there a way that we can hold space for both of these very different political viewpoints in a way that we can actually be productive and not in a way that we'll, keep hurting and making the hurt worse? Is that actually possible? And I'm here to tell you, yes, it is possible. And if you are somebody that wouldn't mind dating somebody that's ideologically different from you, then this video is going to benefit you a lot. But I'm not here to convince you that you have to be with somebody that's from a different political party, but I am here just to get curious about your open-mindedness. How willing would your mind be to date somebody that has different political viewpoints than you? So when it comes to discussing politics, I first want you to get very centered with yourself. You can take a deep breath in, a deep breath out, and bring up a political issue in your head that's extremely important to you, and see where in your body you can locate that sensation being triggered the most. For instance, let's say your number one issue in terms of politics is healthcare. Let's say you're extremely pro-free healthcare. You want it to work in the United States. You've seen it work in other countries. This issue is what drives you to the election polling booth. This is what gets you out of the bed in the morning. I want you to feel what part of your body is most triggered by this issue. Wouldn't be the first time I talk to my ankles on this YouTube channel, but let's say the issue is held in your ankles. Whenever you're talking about the healthcare issue, your ankles start to tighten, your feet start to sweat, and you just feel like an entire sensation down in your ankles that you just don't like. We want to be able to separate yourself from the ankle issue, or yourself from the political strong stance and issue that you hold very deeply to you. So we want to ask your other parts, hey, do you guys mind stepping back? Y'all can wait in the waiting room while I have a conversation here with my ankle part, and I start to see what comes up for me. Once we are able to remove the different parts of yourself, and once we are able to remove the different barriers, I want you to ask this part, if you weren't so busy protecting so-and-so by reminding them of the importance of this issue, if you weren't so busy deep within that job role of getting triggered by this political issue, if you weren't busy defending that, and if you weren't busy defending whoever you are in that, if you weren't busy doing that, what else would you rather be doing? What would you like to be doing instead right now, as opposed to getting triggered? If you could have a different job, what would it be? A lot of times we tend to think that politics is just politics and is clearly rational and all this type of stuff, but yet these issues hold so dear to us and our emotional well-being. I'm not here to take from that, and I'm not here to say to ignore important issues, but really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get in touch with the part of you that's defending this issue, the part of you that feels so high stakes, so up in arms about it, and we're trying to assess what is this job's role, and if it desires to be doing anything different, if it didn't have to protect you from the nature of this issue, what else would it be doing? So instead of my ankles just, cramping up and getting so mad over healthcare and, wanting to, kick all my family members that are in the way of me, that disagree with me on the issue, instead of that, maybe this part would rather be running for office. Maybe this part would actually rather be learning something. Maybe this part would rather be in love with their partner that takes a different political view stance than them. Maybe this part just wants to be in love. So really flesh out and separate that part of yourself that gets so triggered when it comes to these conversations of politics, and see, what is this part trying to tell you? This is simply a mindfulness approach when it comes to political conversations. So you're not speaking from a protective, defensive place, but rather from a place where you can be more in touch with yourself. What is the worst thing that would happen to you if this part stopped doing its job and stopped defending the political ideation or the political party that it really wants to defend? Anyways, with that being said, I will see you guys in a later video. Thank you for joining me. Feel free to comment your thoughts below on politics and dating. And also, if you have not seen, I will put a link to coaching in the comments and in the description. If it does not work, feel free to email me, girlfriendguide4guys@gmail.com with coaching in the subject line, and I will be getting back to you very shortly. And I hope y'all have a great day.